All right. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. We are back. Continuing on with our look at the triennial Torah portion. We today are going to be finishing up with Shemot, Exodus chapter 12. We want to look at the last part of this chapter here, deal with some important things and principles we start to speak about last week. The idea that, as we move, the further we move into Exodus in terms of the 5 books of Moses, the further we move in, the more we begin to receive the different laws, statutes, and commands of the Most High. And with that in mind, understanding that the laws, statutes, and commands of the Almighty are indeed His character humanized. And so when we see these different laws, sometimes when we think about these things, the things that the Most High has instructed for His people to do, we have to remember that, to always seek to know what is the spirit behind these things, because some things, you can't even physically, do, right? And so we have to understand what it is the Most High is trying to put in us or bring out of us in these different commands. So we want to remember those things as we look at the scriptures. And so we're going to go ahead and get into it, right? And so when we look, what we want to think about today as we deal with today's Torah portion is the idea that, the Most High, what the Most High said for His people to rise up and go, to rise up and go. This idea of an Exodus is something that we saw with, the Exodus from Egypt. We know at the, when Messiah returns to regather His people, there's going to be a second Exodus. But also we have to think about that spiritual Exodus that we are called to take part in right now, right? When we that day, that time, that moment that we decide to follow after the Most High through His Son Yeshua, there is a spiritual exodus that begins and is initiated right then and there. And so we want to deal with parts of all of those things today, as we look at the Torah portion. So we're going to pull up the chapter. I believe I think we're going to go ahead and just read through the second part of chapter 12. And then, of course, we'll go back and pull out some of the specifics. All right, so let's pull up the scriptures here. Let's see here, chapter 12. We want to start at verse 29. And we'll just go ahead and read down to the end. Nice and loud.
Exodus 12:29. And it came to be at midnight that Yahweh struck all the firstborn in the land of Mitzrayim, from the firstborn of Pharaoh who sat on his throne to the firstborn of the captive who was in the dungeon, and all the firstborn of livestock. And Pharaoh rose up in the night, he and all his servants, and all the Mitzrites. And there was a great cry in Mitzrayim, for there was not a house where there was not a dead one. Then he called for Moshe and Aaron by night and said, Arise, go out from the midst of my people, both you and the children of Israel, and go, serve Yahweh as you have said. Take both your flocks and your herds, as you have said, and go. Then you shall bless me too. And the Mitzrites were strong on the people to hasten to send them away out of the land, for they said, We are all dying. And the people took their dough before it was leavened, having their kneaded bowls bound up in their garments on their shoulders. And the children of Israel had done according to the word of Moshe. And they had asked from the Mitzrites objects of silver and objects of gold and garments. And Yahweh gave the people favor in the eyes of the Mitzrites, so that they gave them what they asked. And they plundered the Mitzrites, and the children of Israel sent out from Ramses to Succoth about 600,000 men on foot, besides the little ones. And a mixed multitude went up with them too, also flocks and herds, very much livestock. And they baked unleavened cakes of the dough which they had brought out of Mitzrayim, for it was not leavened, since they were driven out of Mitzrayim and had not been able to delay, nor had they prepared food for themselves. And the sojourn of the children of Israel who lived in Mitzrayim was 430 years. And it came to be at the end of the 430 years, on the same day it came to be that all the divisions of Yahweh went out from the land of Mitzrayim. It is a night of watches unto Yahweh for bringing them out of the land of Mitzrayim. This is that night of watches unto Yahweh for all the children of Israel throughout their generations. And Yahweh said to Moshe and Aaron, This is the law of Pesach. No son of a stranger is to eat of it. But any servant, a man who bought for silver, when you have circumcised him, then let him eat of it. A sojourner and a hired servant does not eat of it. It is eaten in one house. You are not to take any of the flesh outside the house, nor are you to break any bone of it. All the congregation of Israel are to perform it. And when a stranger sojourns with you and shall perform the Pesach to Yahweh, let all his males be circumcised, and then let him come near and perform it. And he shall be as a native of the land, but let no uncircumcised eat of it. There is one Torah for the native born and for the stranger who sojourns among you. And all the children of Israel did as Yahweh commanded Moshe and Aaron, so they did. And it came to be on that same day that Yahweh brought the children of Israel out of the land of Mitzrayim according to their divisions.
Okay. Very good. So let's go back up here. Look at some of these things. If we remember last week, the Most High said what he was going to do. And we had a description of what the 10th plague was going to be in the last part of the chapter. And so over here, now we see the execution of the command over here. And so if we go back, let's see, looking at verse 30, where it says, let's see, and Pharaoh rose up in the night down, and there was a great cry. There was a great cry in Mitzrayim. And so if we remember from earlier in the earlier in the verses where it was stated that what was going to happen. Let me see if I can see where that is real quick. We had looked at where it said it was going to be a great cry. I can't see where that's at right now. I want to just pull this up here real quick. Let's see here. Look at this word here. Verse 30. This says Ta'aha. Ta'aka. Which is a shriek. Right? A great shriek. Every time I think about a great shriek is, when I remember a few years back, the people's house across the street was on fire and the lady didn't know where her kids was at. And she literally had a great shriek, right? The kids wasn't in there, but she wasn't sure where they was. And so, this was like, it was the middle of the night. I was knocked out sleep, and then I just hear this great shriek in the land, right? But imagine now, however loud and surprising or disturbing that sound is when you just think about it in terms of one person. But you got all of Egypt making this great cry, because it says, for there was not a house where there was not a dead one, which is interesting. There was not a house where there was not a dead one. Somebody died in all the houses in Egypt. Somebody. So again, imagine, I don't know if you think about it like how it was in the movie where you could see like the death angel going from house to house, and just like one by one the screams begin, or if it's just like all at once, everything happens all at once. But any way that it goes, I could just imagine you can think about how it is when people are making noises, like joyful noises. People are happy, when it's like, the Gregorian New Year's, everybody's yelling all at the same time or something like that. Or you go to a football game and everybody's like all happy all at the same time, but extreme like pain and distress, anger and fear probably all mixed together all at once. And this is what you have over here with this shrieking that's going on in Egypt. Again, because of the judgment that is going forth on them. And so, when we think about what happened over there, this is like the great crescendo. Like they went through all of these plagues, all of these things happened, and Pharaoh and all of his people, had, they manifest their false repentance over and over again, receiving their reprise from each plague. Each bad thing was happening. They felt bad about it happening, and then it would cease, and then they just went right back to where they were. But now you have this thing that's happening, or that has happened, where it says, for there was no home where there was not someone dead. This thing struck Egypt in a mighty way, right? We think about, now we have this coronavirus that's going on, and people, they're giving you the numbers of all of these cases and all of these deaths. But when you think about it in the scope of things, like it's a percentage of the population, right? We talking about every house, right? Every house. We might know somebody or two or even 10 people who've had corona, or had or know people that know people, right? But this is like on a literally on a biblical scale, right? Where it's everybody, right? And so, we just, it caused you just to really think about the repercussions of being on the wrong side of what the Most High is doing. They had 9 chances, right? And they couldn't accept, right, what was going to happen. And so, the result was this great shrieking, this great proclamation, this great crying out of death that had just went through the whole place, right? And so, again, when we think about the Exodus, all of these things are part, these things that we see in the original Exodus, these things are going to be a part of the second Exodus. These things are going to be a part of our removal from this place, right? When we are called by Yeshua to go and be regathered back to the land, his people's going to be gathered up. But his enemies, among his enemies is going to be a great cry, and there's going to be death, right? Just like we see over here. And so, when we think about it from that perspective, again, we look at these things over in Exodus. It helps us to be able to look and understand and look forward to, what it is that the Most High is going to be doing in the last days. And the way things are, we're able to look and see where these things are beginning to happen, right? And again, we look at this, and comparatively speaking, again, we think about what's going on in 2020 and what we see over here. Comparatively speaking, right? It's just fractions of people. These things are going on all over the world, but still, when you think about it as a whole, we're talking about fractions of people. Now, if you was to think about the fact that these over here in this Exodus here, these are the enemies of the Most High. And so, again, if we think about even just right now, if we was to think about, even if we was just to not even if we was to say people that are followers of the Bible. We wasn't just take those people, whatever percentage of people that would be, whether we, categorize them as true followers or not. But if we was just to say, even if we was just to say, follow people who wasn't following the Bible, all of these people just start just dying, just deaths everywhere, right? Judgment. That would be like this. That would be like a huge percentage of people like just dying. And the thing is about it, when we look at this, making the comparisons, the things that was happening, you knew it was from the Most High. There was no doubt about it. We could think about it and say, wow, this really looks like it could be judgment because of the scale of it. But when you think about it, comparing it to the scriptures, it's like these was wicked people. Like you could look and see that these was the wicked ones, where you hear about people just regular people, not necessarily those that's living like a wicked life necessarily, just get sick and die, right? So again, there's comparisons that could be made, but when you think about it in the grand scheme of things, it's really just kind of like the tip of the iceberg. Kind of like when we was looking at the beginnings of the plagues, where things are happening, right? But it's not like it kind of got progressively worse, right? Going from just blood in the river to now, death all over the place, right? But what we want to kind of think about, I think, as kind of a kind of overarching thought that we want to keep coming back to, is what we see over here in verse 31, where, let's see here, where it says 31, where it says, arise and go out from the midst of my people, right? Arise and go out. Arise and go out. Some versions say just rise up and go, right? Rise up and go. And so when we think about, again, we want to kind of just continue to kind of go back and forth when we're looking at the original Exodus and the Exodus, the second Exodus that is to come, and then also really the spiritual Exodus that we have to be actually a part of even now, right? Because when we look at this word over here that is saying to rise up, we want to look at that real quick. Let me pull this up here. Because again, we think about it in the context of what was going on with Israel. Now it's time to go, right? The kids, the firstborns is dying. They have their bread and things that is unleavened. They had their instructions, and now they sitting up here. It says rise up and go. They've been in this land in exile in Egypt for all of the time that they've been there, and now it's time for them to rise up and go, right? And so we want to look at this idea over here, this word rise. When you let me see here, 31. This is a thing that the people that that use the ancient, quote unquote, ancient Hebrew, you know, Quam, Quam,
right.
Quam Yasharala,
Right.
rise, Israel, right? But that's this word over here, to, let me see, which word is it here? Rise up, right here. Kum, which means to rise, literally. Let's see here. Abide, accomplish, confirm, continue, decree, endure, get up. It has kind of a broad usage over here. When we look at this, Hisky, get my little whiteboard. The word, as we see here, is yatsa. Oh wait, that's not it. That's to go. Kum is to rise, and yatsa is to go. I want to look. I want to have black. I want to look at yatsa. Kum is to rise up, and so when we think about the idea of rising up, all right, perfect. When you think about the idea of rising up, you have this idea of being down, right? And then you getting up, right? There was someone that was over you, right? And then now you go and move into a position where now you are up, looking at them in the face, or even potentially looking down on them, right? This is a transitional thing for you to rise, for you to begin to initiate some forms of action, right? Where if you think about things, before I stand up, in my mind, I kind of got to think about standing up, right? But the eventual thing that I want to actually get to is like the action part, the idea of actually getting up, right? Not just thinking about standing up, but literally getting up, right? And so when we think about this idea, you know, the Most High has been saying to his people all of this time, I'm about to move you out of here. I'm about to get you out of here. I'm about to come in with a strong hand and rescue you from the clutches of Pharaoh. But now that time is here, right? Rise up, move into action. They had all this time to think about it, all this time, right? As from the very first time Moshe went over there and said that the Most High said that he's going to come and deliver you from Egypt. Ever since that point, they had the time to think about it, right? The Most High even said for them, you know, how he was going to do it, when he was going to do it, what was going to be involved in him doing it. But now, again, you get to this place where he says, rise up and get you forth, right? And so that action part is a necessary ingredient, right? And so again, but there's something that's added to the rising up, because if all you're going to do is stand up, then what? All right? Because I could remember in the younger days, you sit up here and you get into some type of an argument with somebody. First thing y'all both gonna do is stand up and look at each other. But at some point, something got to give, and it's gonna be more than you just rising up and staring each other down, right? It's gonna be some action beyond the action.
First rather do what?
What you want to do?
Yeah. All right, this is the thinking part again. Now you back to what's gonna happen next.
Right.
I made that initial step of standing up,
Right.
but now what you going to do?
Right.
That is what knocked this stick off my shoulder. Right?
Right.
or like if you're in the dirt, right? The baddest one, you know what I'm saying, cross this line.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Right. But there has to be now an action beyond the action. You done rose up. Now we talking about what now then? Because that's what the Most High is calling for his people to literally do over here. Get up. You got to get up. You've been over here. These people been holding you down. They've been holding you back. They had you in this hard labor, right? For all of this time. They've been in control of your whole person, right? There's not a single ounce of individuality involved in your whole situation. Everything that you do it because they told you to do it. And now he's saying, get up, go out, and serve me. Right? And so you done got up, you done already cooned over here, right? You done stood up, right? But now he's saying, go forth. And so we want to look at this here, go forth, which is that word yatsah. Which literally means to go, to bring out, right? But I like to look at this in the ancient because it has some interesting pictures that are involved over here with the yod, the sadi, and the aleph. Okay, let me show you this here. Look, you see over here, we have Yatsah, which the modern, you have the Yod, the Sadi, and the Aleph. But in the ancient now, you see the Yod, which is this arm in the hand. And so when we see the arm in the hand, that's what you work with, is your arm and your hand. That's where your strength is. If you go to move something, you're moving it with your arm and your hand, right? And so we see this action, again, this action thing going on. And so we look with the Sadi, which is the Sadi is interesting because it has many kind of ideas in it. We see with it the man on his side. The man on his side, but he's on his side because there's a hunt, right? He's hunting. He's crouched down, kind of in a prone position, getting ready to move. He's getting ready to make his attack on his prey. Also, you can see a path and a destination, right? You have the path, the way to get to a place, and then the actual place. And then lastly, you have the ox's head, which gives you that idea of strength, right? And so when we look at this word, yatsah, you have this arm that brings you along the path to the destination with strength, right? Yatsa. And so when you think about the, what that is in terms of the Most High taking his people from one place to another, right? With strength through the path into the destination, right? Not just starting the journey, but getting the people from the start of the journey to the end of it, right? And so again, we look at this thing with rising up, getting out, stand up, move, and then now we even get into the place of allowing the Most High to move you to through the path into the destination with strength, right? And so when we look at the Exodus, the original Exodus, this is what happened, right? You can see the arm of the Most High working in a situation because, look at what happened. This is the greatest. This is the greatest nation over here in terms of wealth and power and strength, and the Most High just brings this nation to his knees, at his, just at will, and says, "Let's go." Right? He goes in there, he beats up the bully, and says, "Come on, let's go." And so when we think about the second Exodus is going to be something that we're able to recognize and remember, because it's going to look like the first Exodus. We look around and we see these powers that be, these people that control everything, that we got to sit up here and just submit to the will of the powers that be, right? The Most High going to come down and say, your time is up. Come on, Israel, let's go, right? And so when we think about this from a spiritual perspective, we have we should have this idea of this separation thing, this removing ourselves from these thoughts and ideas that belong to our oppressors. We got to be able to be separated and remove ourselves from these things right now. We got to rise up and go from the mind of Egypt now, even though we're physically in this actual place. When we think about the idea of Yatsa, again, it's this idea of a physical removal. But again, we're physically sitting here, right? But we have to think about this again, like we always do when we think about the things that the scriptures is showing us, not only from a physical perspective, but from a spiritual perspective. If we go over to, I lost my cursor. We go over to Ephesians. Let me get rid of this real quick. Ephesians, let's see, chapter 2. Verses 5 and 6. What's that say right there? Ephesians 2, 5 and 6.
It says, even when we were dead in trespasses, you made us alive together with Messiah. By favor, you have been saved, and raised us up together and made us sit together in the heavenlies with Messiah.
Okay, so when we think about this, when we think about this, the fact that it says when we were dead in trespasses. So you think about that time before you were joined to Messiah. You were dead in trespasses. You were dead because of your transgressions. The wages of sin is death. You sat around and you sinned your whole life. And the payment that you was going to receive for that sin, those trespasses, is death. But he said, right, even when you were dead in trespasses, he made us alive together with Messiah. By favor, you have been, past tense, saved and raised us up together now and made us sit together in the heavenlies. So we could think about this in terms of the fact that the Most High looked at us where we was at, made provisions through Messiah while we was over there, and then allow for these things to be manifest in our life right now for us to be attached to these promises that obviously didn't happen yet, because I'm sitting over here in Mount Oliver. But he said he makes us to sit together in the heavenlies in Messiah. So when we're in Messiah, we're attached to this this destination, even though we didn't physically manifest that thing yet. And so when we think about the idea of Yatsal, which again is this physical movement, this being physically moved from one place to another, when we look at this scripture over here, it's helping us to understand about the idea or the concept of being in a place but being separated from that place and actually being somewhere else
Right.
at the same time.
Right.
All of those things are going on. I'm here, but I'm not here, but I am here. Right? And so when we think about that, we have to think about that in a way where what was it that was necessary to go on in the minds of Israel over here, right? And what is the thing that we can see that they wasn't able to be manifest in their lives? They got moved out of Egypt physically. It was physically moved, but they were still attached to that place, which was the thing that caused so many problems, because they was physically moved, but they were still mentally, spiritually attached to that place. And so one of the things that we have to think about and that has to be applied to our lives is in our minds, in our souls, in our spirits, we got to rise up and we got to get out. Even though you didn't never even get out your chair. Don't get me wrong, you need to get up out that chair, right? But if you then never have this thing kind of formulated in your mind first, how's it gonna be manifest? It can't be. Or you can't even get up and go nowhere if you didn't never kind of formulate no idea about what you're gonna do. Right? You need this. They got to have all these components. But again, we look over here at this thing over in Ephesians. This thing in Ephesians is readying us for having something that hasn't physically happened yet be something that's so real in our minds and our spirits that it might as well have already happened. Similarly, when we think about Abraham, when his name was changed, right? He became a father of many nations before he even became a father of one. And it was necessary for his name to be changed like that to set everything in motion. Where his whole purpose and his whole being was changed and transitioned before anything even happened. Right at that time, there's still doubt in his mind. There's still doubt in his wife's mind. Right? There's doubt all over the place. But in terms of what the Most High said, from the very moment that Avram turned into Avraham, he at that moment was a father of many nations, which again is giving you that idea of having this thing be solidified and something that's concrete on the inside of you first, so that you're able to move forward in victory. If I know that Yeshua in me strengthens me and allows me to go forward in might and in power, it's going to help me to go forward in might and in power, to know that he's is with me every step of the way. If I don't know that, if I don't have that truth established in my heart, my mind, it's going to cause me to kind of walk kind of soft-footed around, because I'm not sure if he's going to be there for me and with me or not. And so when we think about this idea of rising up and moving forward and going, the idea of having that strong faith is something that is a necessity for this thing to go the way that it's supposed to go. Let me pull this up. Let me pull up Romans. We still talking about the Exodus, right? But we talking about that mind, that state of mind that has to be activated for us to be able to be victorious, right? So let's look at Romans chapter 4, because again, we want to do this now. We want to rise up and go right now where you are. Okay, so let's see. Romans 4 verse 17. Let's read down to 21. Romans 4 and 17 down through 21.
As it has been written, I have made you father of many nations in the presence of him whom he believed, even Elohim, who gives life to the dead and calls that which does not exist as existing, who against all expectation did believe in expectation, so that he should become father of many nations, according to what was said, so shall your seed be. And not having grown weak in belief, he did not consider his own body already dead, being about 100 years old, and the deadness of Sarah's womb. He did not hesitate about the promise of Elohim through unbelief, but was strengthened in belief, giving esteem to Elohim, and being completely persuaded that what he had promised, he was also able to do.
Okay, so again, when we look at this is tools for victory in our situation, right? We can look over here at our father Abraham and how the Most High looked at his situation and said, this is so harsh. The deadness of Sarah's womb. He looked at Sarah and her dead womb and said, there's actually life over there in that dead thing. And they was forced to have to agree with the Most High. Right? It says that he did not hesitate about the promise of Elohim through unbelief, but was strengthened in belief or faith, giving honor and esteem to Elohim. And so again, over here, when we're thinking about Abraham, he had faith in what the Most High did, which gave him power to be able to move forward in something that actually seemed as if it was physically impossible. Sometimes it seems physically impossible for us to live a life that's contrary to this world that we live in, and the thoughts and ideas that are connected with this world that we live in. Sometimes it seems impossible. But the Most High is telling us that it's not impossible, even though it seems like it is. And he gonna look at this dead situation, just like he looked at Sarah's dead womb, and say, there's actually life to be lived, even though it appears that everything is dead all around me. And so just like Abraham, we can't hesitate about the promises of Elohim, because he definitely made some promises, right? And so when we think about this again in the context of the Exodus, right? The Most High for Israel sets the stage. He done did all of these things, but still it's necessary for them to continue in faith in order to move forward. They saw what he did already, but still they got to go to the Egyptians and say, give me your stuff. And then they got to turn around and leave out of there too. Right? There's all of these actions. It's just action after action, actually. It's like this continual thing that is showing the manifestation of faith. He said he was going to deliver Israel from Egypt, but then they got to go. He said for them to go, but then also he said for them to come to confront their enemy one last time before they go. And not only that, but just plunder, just take whatever they wanted, right? So it was a conflict, right? There was it wasn't like just like this easy thing. It wasn't like they wasn't going there to sing songs and be happy. They was going to take whatever they wanted to take. Plunder is what it says, right? Over in the back in Exodus, right? We talked about last week how when we looked at this, we saw that it used the word that was translated as borrow, but we know let's see. Oh, here, look, 35. It says, and they had asked from the Mitzrites objects of silver and objects of gold and garments. But we know even from the context that it wasn't borrowing, it wasn't even asking, because when we get over to here, it says that they literally plundered them, right? And so they went in there. If you plundering, like how when my car got I can't even say broken into because I left the car door open. But how my car got plundered. When I opened up the door, all the contents of my glove box is out on the seat. All like every little secret compartment is open, and all the things that used to be in those secret compartments was gone. Right? That's plundering. Right? It wasn't even like like it looked like things were taken. Stuff everywhere, just a mess. All the good stuff was taken, the bad stuff was left behind. That's a plunder, right? And so again, the Most High is asking for there to be this confrontation with the former master, and I feel like part of this confrontation is kind of the removal of the power that the one had over the other, right? Just to be sure that our relationship ain't like it used to be, where you was over me. I'm gonna stand up and I'm just gonna take what I want, and you just gonna stand over there and not do anything but watch me do it. As a matter of fact, you could go find the stuff that I can't find and give me that too. Right? So when we think about this now, again, from a spiritual perspective, the idea of this spiritual exodus that has to go on the inside of us so that we're able to move forward is something that helps us to think about aspects of the new covenant, because the new covenant, again, if you didn't know, is about the regathering of Israel, right? And so, but when we look at scriptures, we understand. I'm probably going to, in the soon coming days, release something that deals with the idea of the new covenant, and the fact that we actually are in the new covenant even right now, because there's so many times as recently even that I've seen people sit up here and talk about this idea that we're not in the new covenant. I'm not gonna get too much into it, but just to say something for you to mull over. If we're not in the new covenant right now, then there's one or two things is true. Either you're still in the old covenant or you don't have a covenant. Okay, but that's all I want to say about that. So again, we have to think about this idea of a separation that has to be made, in our hearts and in our minds, because of the fact that from a spiritual perspective, we have a new master and we have been removed from our old master. And this is an idea that is prevalent among Yeshua and his disciples, in terms of things that they was teaching. And so again, we look at what physically happened with the original Exodus. It was about, this actually was kind of like, almost like, I feel like it was like a psychological thing that they did here with going and plundering Egypt before they left, and letting them know, each and every one of them, letting each and every Egyptian know that the things had shifted and it was no longer over Israel anymore. And they had to sit there and something that their granddaddy gave them was taken by an Israelite, and there was nothing they could do about it. Their most prized possession that granddaddy gave to daddy that gave to me, and I just had to hand it over to this Israelite, and there was nothing that I could do about it. Right? They had to do something on the inside of them, like, and they could be mad, but it wasn't nothing they could do about it. Right? There was nothing they could do about it. And they seen the power that came that was behind Israel already, because they just got finished shrieking out. And then next thing you know, there's a knock on the door, and there's some Israelite daughters out there talking about, give me your gold and your silver. And they didn't even fight for it. It wasn't like they went in there and beat them up.
Mhm.
They just said, I need that. Run that.
Right.
and they had to do it. So I'm saying that what happened even inside of the Egyptians was something that was happening in their minds, in their hearts, to know that the time that for them to be over Israel was done. It was over. It wasn't even like, I'm gonna get you back for this. It was just done. It was like a power move, right? And so again, from a spiritual perspective, we kind of have to think about our situation like that, where we're looking at ourselves and our flesh and our physical minds, and letting our physical mind know that there's a new sheriff in town, and that old self, those old things that you used to love to do, you're not going to be doing those things no more, because now I got to move the way the Messiah wants for me to move. Right? It's necessary for you to go and put your carnal mind on notice and say that there's new management. We're not doing things that way anymore, right? We have to rise up and go. And so the thing about it is that he's shaking everything. The thing about it is that it's not even sitting up here saying rise up and then think about going, or try to figure out how you're going to get up and then make a plan about it and then go. It's about rise up and go. And so I think when you think about how this kind of plays out, in a practical arena, people decide that they want to follow after Messiah, and then they hold on to a lot of the things that don't have nothing to do with Messiah. They keep those things, and then just gradually kind of just get rid of those things because they like those things. But when you think about kind of the underlying principles that's involved in what is going on over here, it's about when you truly making that decision, you're turning away from those things, and maybe you don't know how you're going to not do those things, but you still turned around away from those things and start moving away from those things, and you work out that other part later. Even when you think about Abraham, where he just had to go move forward. He didn't know where he was getting to. He just knew he couldn't be where he was at. He had to have people. He wasn't going around introducing himself as Avram anymore. He was introducing himself as father of many nations, even though he didn't have no kids. And so you have to go around, you know, as if you're seated in heavenly places, even though you sitting in the middle of some ghetto somewhere. You had to have a particular mindset, even though there's nothing but wickedness around you. Because that's part of what we're called to do. That's part of the idea of rising up and going. And the Most High will give you the strength to endure all the things that you think got control over you. But you got to make that move. You got to get up. You got to step across the line. You got to slap that stick off of the adversary's shoulder. You got to make that move. Look at some verses over here. John 17, verse 14 through 19.
It says, I have given them your word, and the world hated them because they are not of the world, as I am not of the world. I do not pray that you should take them out of the world, but that you keep them from the wicked one. They are not of the world, as I am not of the world. Set them apart in the truth. Your word is truth. As you set me into the world, sent me into the world, I also sent them into the world. And them I set myself apart so that they too might be set apart in truth.
Okay, he said, what is that? He said, the world hated them because they are not of the world. I think some people might have a problem right over here. Because Yeshua's giving you, if we look this up in the King James, these is red words over here. This is Yeshua speaking over here. He's saying what actually is or should be. In terms of the world hated them. He's talking about them as his disciples. Those that follow after Yeshua, the world should be hating them. There should be a distinction between those that's following after Yeshua and the world and the mainstream. If y'all twins out here, the world and the mainstream, and you as a follower of Messiah, then guess what? You may not be a follower of Messiah. Because the disciples, the followers of Messiah, live their lives in such a way where it don't resemble that of the world. He said, don't take them out the world. They're gonna be in the world. They're gonna be in the world. But they're gonna be kept or guarded from the wicked one in the world. But if you like hanging out with or partying with the wicked one, then you not being kept from the wicked one. You joining forces with the wicked one. And so again, we think about this idea of rising up and getting out. It's more than you just in your mind making a decision to be different. It's about you actually being different. Because he's not saying for us to be out of the world, because we're alive. We're here. But there has to be a distinction. There has to be a separation. Just like Yeshua was alive. They are not of the world as I am not of the world. That's what Yeshua is saying. I'm walking around right now. Well, he's at the point where he's getting ready to be taken out of the world at this point in John chapter 17. But he's saying these disciples that are going to be left behind, they are going to be set apart in truth, which is the word of the Most High. And so again, we have to be able to get to that place where the actual word of the Most High is embedded in our hearts and our minds, and not only embedded in our hearts and our minds, but brings us to a place of transformation, changing us from the inside out and causing us to walk in his ways and not look like where we came from. And so, this is an important component of this idea, again, of this manifestation of, rising up and going. We got to rise up and go. Right? We got to rise up and go. But the first place you do that is within yourself. Within yourself. Right? And again, he didn't say to Israel over there in the Exodus, make a plan about how you going to get up and get out of there. The plan was to let this arm, this mighty arm, lead you through the path into the destination with strength. That's the only plan that you need. That you need to trust in the Most High and his strength that he gives you through the Ruach HaKodesh to enable you to be able to move forward. All right, let's look at something else over here. Let's see here. So some necessary situations over here that got to be on the inside of us, because we in some curious times right now. And we need to be protected from the wicked one. But if we sitting up here being like the wicked one, again, we're not going to be protected from him, because we inviting him into our whole situation.
First John 2:15, just that.
Through 17.
Okay. Do not love the world, nor that which is in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. Because all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life, is not of the Father, but is of the world. And the world passes away, and the lust of it. But the one doing the desire of Elohim remains forever.
That said, the one doing the desire of Elohim remains forever. All that other stuff passes away. But he said what the other stuff was, right? Stuff that's in the world gonna pass away. The lust of the flesh gonna pass away. The lust of the eyes gonna pass away. The pride of life gonna pass away. Because all of those things is not of the Father. All of those things is in the world. So if I'm looking at you and all the stuff you talking about got to do with the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, the pride of life, that's all you ever got to talk about. That's all I ever see you doing. Guess what? Not only is all of that stuff gonna pass away, but you gonna pass away with it because you love that stuff. That's why you talk about it so much. Out of the abundance of the heart does the mouth speak. That's what Yeshua said. That's red letters. I don't know what verse it is. Out of the abundance of the heart does the mouth speak. The thing that you always talking about, the thing that you always loving to do and be about, that's what you love. You love that stuff. So you could say that you don't love the world. Meanwhile, your actions is manifesting that you love the world. I can sit up here and say that I don't love somebody, but all I sit up here and do is do all this nice stuff for them and be there for them and got all this stuff that all I do is talk about them. Guess what? I actually love that person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Actions speak louder than words.
Actions speak louder than words.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to sit up here and look at ourselves and determine who it is that we love. Because if we love these things and we could take all of these things that we love to do and we love to talk about and we could put them into one of these categories: lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes, pride of life, then these is all things that's all gonna pass away. But if we sitting up here and every time you talk to every time somebody talking to you, you talking to them about the desires of Elohim and how to please the Father and doing those things which the Father is moving you to do, then now you doing things that's resembling the Most High and righteousness, and those things remains forever. We sit up here and when you're doing works that's building up the kingdom of Elohim, the kingdom of Elohim is everlasting. That ain't going nowhere. That's actually taking the place of this thing that we sit up here doing right now. And so again, when we think about this idea of what we're talking about, the fact that we need to rise up and go, you need to just get up and go. That's what repentance, that's what teshuvah, that's what we talking about when we saying that Yeshua said to pick up your torture stake and follow me. In other words, you get ready because some bad stuff about to happen to you for my sakes and follow me. Just get ready for the bad stuff. You don't know what the bad stuff gonna be, but just know that it's coming though, and follow me. Rise up and go. That's the same thing that the Most High said over there to Israel and Egypt. Just rise up and go. I'm not gonna tell you that they finna chase you down out here into the wilderness. I'm gonna take care of it, but it's probably gonna be a little bit of anxiety because you're gonna be looking back and you're gonna be seeing that they chasing you down, and it's gonna be a sea over there that's in between you, and it's gonna seem like you in some impossible mission that I'm leading you on. But just rise up and go. Ain't no boats in sight, but just rise up and go. There's no preparation involved in this thing. There's not. They don't even talk. There's no growth process spoken of over here. The growth comes in the doing. The growth comes in the doing. You might be trying to live righteous and then you trip up and fall. That's different from trying to figure out what you're supposed to do and making a plan and a list and all of this stuff and then doing it. Right? If you moving in the right direction, pitfall comes and you sit up here and fall down in the pit. And that's what he's saying for you to get up and rise up and do. And then the next time you gonna have that foresight to dodge the pit or to jump over the pit. But if all you gonna do is sit up here and think about it without no action, that ain't what we seeing over here. Because he said to rise up and go forth. And so again, if we live in this life that looks like the world, and everything that we doing, is not set apart, then we never did this thing over here. We never did this part. And so again, we not going to be ready for that second Exodus if we didn't never have this spiritual one happen in our hearts and in our minds. We can't even make it to the second Exodus because we never turned away from our old master. Again, these things, you think that these things is just little trivial information that he's giving you, but it's nuggets to help you and strengthen you in your situation. You got to let your old master know who's the boss. And that's what they did over there when they said, give me all your stuff. You don't control me no more. That's what you got to say to your carnal mind. You don't control me no more. You don't got no power over here anymore. Done. It's not even a conversation. That's what we learned from this whole thing. And we talked about this last week with the idea of just the women going and saying, give with their soft voices, give me your silver and your gold. Right? Because the power ain't human power, it's spiritual power. The Most High strong arms going in there and he's doing it, right? Let me look at a couple more of these verses before we go into something else over here. Okay, let me look at this one real quick. I'll pull this one up here. Philippians 3 and 20 and 21. What's that say right there? Oh, wait, let me get this enlarged real quick. Okay.
For our citizenship is in the heavens, from which we also eagerly wait for the Savior, the Master, Yeshua Messiah, who shall change our lowly body to be conformed to his esteemed body according to the working by which he is able even to bring all under his control.
Okay, so it says there our citizenship is in the heavens. That's where our citizenship is over there. And so when you sit up here, and you look at these, sometimes you see these movies where you got these little diplomats. And they'll be somewhere like you see these movies in these foreign countries and these diplomats, and they have like this elevated sense of security whenever these little dignitaries and so-called authorities come around and try to tell them what to do. You can't tell me what to do. I am a diplomat. I can't be touched by your little authority over there, because their citizenship ain't of the citizenship of where they're standing, and they have special protection allotted to them as being these diplomats in these little these various places over there. And so Paul sitting over telling us the same kind of a thing in terms of the fact that our citizenship is in the heavens. The one that's the controller of you and I is actually Messiah, not not your carnality, right? Where he's going to come and do away with all of that anyway, right? And so he's giving you this knowledge that helps you to be able to move forward and move beyond these things that so-called bind you up, right? If you would just do as the Moses sang in terms of rising up and going, right? Put these things into action. Move forward. I'll get you to the place where you need to be at. But you got to get up and you got to put one foot in front of the other. All right, let's get back to the Torah. Get back over there real quick. Verse, let's see here. Okay, so another thing I wanted to think about over here is when we look at verse 38, where it talks about this mixed multitude that went up with them. It already told us that there wasn't a house in Egypt that didn't have somebody dead in it. So when we think about this mixed multitude, we're talking about one or two things. We're talking about people that potentially was already dwelling where Israel was, that wasn't part of Israel, or or in addition to that, could also include somebody who was Egyptian in this mixed multitude. But for that one, think about what that would entail to be somebody who saw all of that stuff and even had all of this stuff been done happen to them, where they still was like, that must be Elohim. It's interesting to think about who these people actually were, this mixed multitude, because potentially it was people who just got finished seeing their loved ones die. And they still went with Israel because of the fact, again, when you look at, the whole reason why he was doing all of this stuff, the Mosai, he was showing that he was more powerful. He was most powerful. He was the most powerful, right? And he was, again, it says before, he's showing both Israel and anybody else who sees these things. And so it's interesting, again, when we think about the idea of the new covenant, where, at this time that we're in, where he has scattered his people all over the place, all over the world, where we have the capability and possibilities for the original Exodus to be mimicked in the second Exodus, to have these people who are actually bearing witness to the gathering of the people of Israel, and those people joining themselves to Israel and moving out right with them. just like they did in the original Exodus. When you look in Revelation, let me pull that up real quick. Chapter 7.
Revelation.
When you look at Revelation chapter 7, where we talk about the 144,000 of Israel that's sealed, you see, if we go down, let's see where he starts at. In verse 4, where he seals out of all the tribes of Israel, Judah, Reuben, Gad, Asher, Naphtali, Manasseh, Simeon, Levi, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph, Benjamin. And then read verses 9 and 10.
After this, I looked and saw a great crowd, which no one was able to count, of all nations and tribes and peoples and tongues, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, dressed in white robes and palm branches in their hands, and crying out with a loud voice, saying, "Deliverance belongs to our Elohim who sits on the throne and to the Lamb."
Okay, so this is interesting here. But when we look at this, you saw these nations that were standing there. They were standing there before the throne, dressed in white robes. What's this say? Verse 8. Hold on, verse 7 and 8.
It said, "Let us be glad and rejoice and give him praise, for the marriage of the Lamb has come, and his wife prepared herself. And to her it was given to be dressed in fine linen, clean and bright. For the fine linen is the righteousness of this set apart one."
It said the fine linen is the righteousness of the set apart ones. It's giving you this picture of this white robes, just like how we just looked at these other ones over here in this chapter. What was that? Chapter 7. That was in the white robes, talking about our Elohim. And this is in addition to natural Israel. So we got natural Israel over here sewed up. Natural Israel. That's what we was trying to do in the first place. But then in addition to natural Israel, you got these ones, this mixed multitude that comes out, who's dressed in white robes, talking about deliverance belongs to our Elohim. Our Elohim.
And another good point on this is a crowd which no one was able to count. So
right, we could count this one.
Yeah, he was able to count them,
but you can't even count this one. You can't even count it. I mean, I can't hardly count. Every time I think about 144,000, I think about Heinz Field. I think is like 70-something thousand capacity. It'd be a gang of people in that place.
I think of Allegheny County only got like 300,000 people.
300,000? the whole county.
Whole county, yeah, the county.
That's the county. That seems crazy.
Exactly. That ain't a lot of people at all.
Well, I guess looking at it both ways. In terms of it being a lot of people, it's not that many people.
Right.
But I was just saying, when I look at 70,000, it looks like a whole bunch of people.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But you're right, it's not a lot of people in the big scope of things.
Right.
If you just think about 300,000 in the county, so like more than half of that
Yeah.
in the whole world.
Exactly.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, just fit
Wow.
in. Exactly. Yeah.
So when you think about that, that should do a couple things. When you think about the fact that if we say that the amount of Israel, natural Israel, that there's a number on it, and that number could just be a number of perfection where he's giving you that idea to say that there's a perfect amount that's going to be maybe not necessarily 144, but he's giving you that as kind of an idea of he has a perfect set amount of Israel that's going to be there, but at the same time, it's not even close to being all. More than 144,000 came out of Egypt. And so either way you look at it, the idea is that when Israel came out, there was people that attached itself to Israel who was able to enjoy life, and they was able to enjoy a life that was connected to the creator of all things. It was different. You didn't have all of the privileges that a natural born would have, but still, comparatively speaking, what was behind them with Egypt, it was death, right? And so
I don't know if you looked into it. I haven't, but thinking about ancient Egypt and the time of the Exodus, where they would call somebody a Nazarite. Like for instance, when we go to the New Testament, we had different nations that would be in there that would call themselves the Roman or Greeks, but that wasn't actually naturally or of the particular nation or be Roman or whatever. It was like a nation type thing, like we'll call ourselves American, but
yeah.
So it was like, because Egypt was so big, it was the popping place during that time. There was other nations too in there that, if you followed the Egyptian way, you was considered a Nazarite.
Yeah.
Mizraim, because you took on all of that. So then when we go to the part where it say the mixed multitude came out, it might not just been actual just Egyptians or Canaanites or whatever.
Yeah.
It could have been other nations.
It could have been, yeah.
People. Yeah.
That's what I was saying, where I feel like I almost feel like it would have been like a harder kind of a thing for the mixed multitude to actually be real Egyptians because of the fact that they, where it said every house in Egypt there was a death in that house. Not to say that it wasn't, but to me that's more of a miracle to even say that. But to your point, and that, the point is that is not is those that's not Israelites, whether they was Egyptian or any other nation. I think the fact that it for them to be it's more of a point, I would say, for them to be just some other random nations that just was in that area that, like you say, was kind of like citizens of Egypt, but not necessarily Egyptian. But either way, the idea when we look at Exodus 12 and 38, and then we think about Revelations chapter 7, is the fact that when we go back to to Genesis to Bereshit, the Most High, the problem with mankind was sin, and this way to redeem mankind is through Israel. And so, even when we look at the promise that's given to Abraham, is given to Abraham so that the whole earth can be blessed through Israel. Can't get around Israel being right in the middle of this situation. But we also can't get around the fact that he wants for his creation as a whole to be restored back to his original purposes. So we just wanted to throw that out there. I wanted to quickly touch on verse 40. Verse 40. Let's go back. Get ready to be done here. This version, read this version here, verse 40, 40 and 41.
And the sojourn of the children of Israel who lived in Mizraim was 430 years. And it came to be at the end of 430 years, on that same day, it came to be that all the divisions of Yahweh went out from the land of Mizraim.
Okay, very good. So I'm not going to go too far into this idea over here, showing this. But if we go back to the beginning of Exodus, where it gives you the genealogy of the family of Levi, where it's giving you Moses's lineage. If we go all the way back to Levi, who came into Egypt, and we say that each son that made it to that, each son of Levi and his son's son, if we say that he lived his whole life, because it gives you the ages, if he lived his whole life, and then on his death, when he died, his son was born, and then they lived their whole life, and then when he dies, his son was born, and they lived their whole life. Even if you did that, we know that's not what happened. Their sons wasn't being born on the day of their father's death.
There's overlap.
Huh?
Some overlap.
There's overlap.
Yeah.
But even if you did that, you don't get 430 years. If you did do that, if you say there was no overlap, and then you go back to Exodus, Exodus chapter let's see what it is. This is chapter 3. Hold on a second. Hold on, where is that at? One second here. I thought there was a telling of the fathers of Moses and Levi, a little Levi lineage in the beginning chapters of Exodus. I'm not seeing it.
What was he telling them?
A little genealogy of the oh, because I'm going back too far. It's in chapter okay, it's in chapter 6. Hold on. Is that it? And the sons of Levi, corn generations, Gershon, Kohath. Oh yeah. Chapter 6 and 16. Exodus 6 and 13. So it gives you the genealogy of Moses and Aaron, right? So that's Reuben, Simeon, 16 is okay. So Levi, that's what we're saying here. So Levi goes into Egypt with the 12 tribes of the other 12 tribes of Israel. Levi goes in, and then so he has 1, 2, 3 sons, right? Gershon, Kahath, and Merari. And the years of the life of Levi were 137. Right? So if we said that Levi lived 137 years, you got your little, oh, you got the baby calculator. So if he lived 137 years, and then when he died, let's see, he had Gershon. Hold on. Oh, here, this son here. So when he died, he had Kahath, who had Amram. That's the father we're looking for. So this father here, let's see, his life was 133. So 137 plus 133.
270.
Oh, that's 270. Okay, so then Amram. Okay, Amram lived. This here is Moses' father, Amram. So he lived 137 plus 137.
407.
Uh-oh. Wait a second. So that's 407.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, close.
So that's 407. And then so that's Moses' daddy right there. So Moses, so if but they only live us 30 years though, right? That's 407. They only give us 23 years.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's only 23 years left.
Yeah.
And so he was already, how old was he when he was exiled? When he killed the Egyptians? Did I give you that? Let's see here. We need an age for Moses. because he can't. We only got 23 years now. If they die, and they each one was born at the death of their fathers to get to 430.
So it says here,
But we do get an age of Moses somewhere.
it says in Acts 7:23, thus Moses was 40 years old when he decided to visit his own people, the Israelites. The second time he was kicked out by Pharaoh out of Egypt together with the Israelites. He was 80. I can't point the scripture, but it says it's quoted in Acts 7:23.
So he was 80 when they left out of Egypt.
Yeah.
Well, that's too many years then, right?
When he was exiled, what is he, 30?
So if he was 40 when he exiled, that's already too many years. Because he only got 23 years in order to get to 430. So if he was 40 whenever he killed the Egyptian, that's already more than 430. Right?
When he was a full 40 years old, it came into his heart to visit his brethren, the children of Israel. And after seeing them suffer wrong, he defended him and avenged him that was oppressed and smote the Egyptian. So it said he was 40 when he did that.
Right.
So
So that's too many years. So, but even that, what we did there is not what happened. Like the son wasn't born at the death of there was overlap. So that pushes your number back significantly, I would say. And so if we just think about it like that, we can't really go back to the 70 people that went into Egypt, that is Israel, the 70 people that belong to the family of Israel going into Egypt as the beginning of the 430 years. I think the way that is written in some of these versions makes you think about it in terms of being in Egypt, like that verse. This version here, now the time that the sons of Israel lived in Egypt was 430 years. When you read that version of it, it causes you to, it makes it seem as though they was in Egypt for 430 years. What does the King James version say?
In Exodus right there?
Exodus 12 and 40. I think it reads the same.
It says, now the sojourning of the children of Israel who dwelt in Egypt was 430.
Okay. Hold on, read that again. That's interesting.
It says,
Hold on, let me pull it up real quick. 12:40. Let me put it on King KJV. That's interesting, that the way that reads, because you could look at it a different way. What does that say?
Now the sojourning of the children of Israel who dwelt in Egypt was 430 years.
Okay, now so see that. Oh wait, I didn't even have it up on the screen. When you look at that, the way we read English is interesting, because you can take this part out and this don't change what's being said in the sentence. This sentence is trying to tell you that the sojourning of the children of Israel was 430 years. This right here is giving you something that's connected to the children of Israel. So the sojourning of the children of Israel, who actually dwelt in Egypt was 430 years. It's telling descendants is telling you about their sojourning. Oh, by the way, they dwelt in Egypt for 430 years. Their sojourning was 430 years, not their dwelling in Egypt.
Oh,
You see how you can look at it like that?
yeah.
Their sojourning was 430 years. But when I say who dwelt in Egypt, I'm just trying to get you like Jonathan who lives over there in Overbrook came to visit me. Jonathan came to visit me, but he lives over in. And when you look at different versions, let's see how I don't know how many versions I got on here. Let's see. This is the American Standard. The time that the children see. This one's like unto the scriptures. The time that they dwelt in Egypt was 430. You can't read those. Oh, JPS. Look, the time that they dwelt in Egypt. A lot of these versions say it like this. Actually, this one differs, whereas splitting it up. Now the sojourning of the children of Israel who dwelt in Egypt was 430 years. The time of the dwelling of the sons of Israel, which they dwelt in. Oh, you know what? Let's see what this mechanical translation does. I'm just saying all this because I feel like it's literally impossible for them to have literally been in Egypt for 430 years.
Saying it's impossible.
I believe that is literally impossible based on kind of what we just looked at in terms of we pile the fathers on top of each other. It gets us pretty close already. And then I believe it's Josephus that gives you the age of Moses.
Okay.
Where they're getting at 40 years old. I have to go back and look. But
Well, in Acts, that's what I was reading.
I know, but in Acts, where's Acts getting it from?
Oh, okay. Yeah, gotcha.
Let me see what this mechanical. We're kind of going off on a little.
Biblical adventure.
Yeah. We are, let's see, 12:40. Okay, the mechanical translation. This let me just say this mechanical translation. I just got this. Jeff Benner, the Torah, the mechanical translation. What he does is he takes, when we look at the Hebrew words, we've done it even today. We look at these Hebrew words and it gives you like 10 words it could be. And the translators could look at this one word and interpret it like 12 different ways.
Yeah.
Which gives you these different translations where it could say a whole other thing because they took this word and they're using it in a different way. So what Jeff Benner's mechanical translation does, which Jeff Benner's also the one who gives you these those word pictures, the ancient Hebrew word pictures. But instead of giving you the words in 10 different ways, he keeps it uniform every place. So he's using that word in a way that the literal translation of the word is this. And every time that word is used, he gives it to you just like that. And so let's see. He says, let's see. Interesting. So he says, and the settling of the sons of Israel who settled in Mitzrayim was 30 and 400 years. So he's saying it basically like we were saying in that other one, where the Israel's the one who settled in Mitzrayim, but their sojourning was 430 years. And so I think when we think about the idea of Israel sojourning, it takes you back to Abraham. Now if we go back to Abraham, understanding that the fathers, all their years indeed do overlap. If we take it back to Abraham up until Israel comes out of Egypt, we can get to this 430 number, 430 year number. The only way, and to me, I feel like that's where we can easily get that 430 year number, is going back to Abraham. Otherwise, most people who look at the scriptures over here from a kind of a scholarly perspective, or that number of the time when Israel was literally in Egypt was probably more like a little over 200 years. You know, if you take into account the people living, some having babies, raising their children, and which we, people burying their parents, right? With that overlap, it's probably more so like a little over 200 years. Which again, now saying all of that, when you look back at Bereshit, where we see in let's see, Genesis 15 and 13. Let's go back to this. Genesis 15 and 13. What's that say there?
And he said to Abram, know of a surety that the seed shall be a stranger in the land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall be afflicted, and they shall afflict them 400 years.
Okay, so one of the reasons why we look at this verse over here, Genesis 15 and 13, as being something that is prophetic in nature, is because nobody believes. Well, I'm sure there's some people. Many scholars don't believe that Israel was in Egypt for 400 years, being afflicted and serving them for 400 years. Most scholars believe that Israel was in Egypt for a little over 200 years, which means that this over here got to be something else. Because this verse says there'll be a stranger in the land that's not theirs and shall serve them and afflict them for 400 years. The serving and the afflicting seems to be connected to the 400 years, where Israel had some good times in Egypt. Clearly, they clearly had good times in Egypt with Joseph.
Yeah, because Pharaoh had to turn it up on them. When he said Sunday they was multiplying.
Yeah, it had to switch.
Yeah.
So they was clearly in Egypt, a time where it was good in Egypt. right? But when we look at the prophecy over here in Genesis 15 and 13, it's giving you this affliction and this servitude that's connected to the 400 years. So when we look at this, I think that it helps us to see that this is part of prophecy, right? Okay, so that being said, let's move on from that. I wanted to just real quick go to let's see here. Get kind of a little sad thing. I wanted to real quick go to let's see here. I want to go to Revelation real quick, 18, then we'll be done. Just mention this in light of this idea of rise up and go, turning away from Egypt and going. Let me see if this is it here. Okay, yeah. Read Revelation 18, 1 through 4.
And after these, I saw another angel come down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was lighted with his glory. And he cried mightily in a strong voice, saying, Babylon the great is fallen, and has become the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird. For all nations are drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of their delicacies. And I heard another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, and that ye receive not of her plague.
Okay, very good. So when we think about the Exodus, the Exodus from Egypt, which is like unto the second Exodus that will be, which is also connected to our spiritual Exodus that we must partake in as followers of Messiah. When we think about Babylon, when we think about Egypt, we think about these great powers that oppress and rule over the people of the Most High. It's necessary for us, just like it was necessary for Israel back then, for there to be a distinction and a separation from these powers, whether it be Egypt, whether it be Babylon, whether it be the US of A. It's necessary for the people of the Most High to make a separation, a distinction from these oppressive powers and join themselves to the Most High. And these two things aren't, they can't be done simultaneously. You can't be connected to Messiah as well as be connected to these powers over you. Egypt, Babylon, US of A, right? It says all nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornications, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. The reach of this Babylon thing is has touched all nations, and all the nations is drunk off of the wine that's connected to this Babylon thing here. And just like when we looked over there in Egypt with Israel, it became necessary from the Father for his people to make a clear distinction between themselves and Egypt, so that the death angel was able to come and not touch them where they was at. And the same thing is the case over here. Look, this is exactly the same thing going on. The people is inside of Babylon, and Babylon's connected to all this wickedness, and the people of Israel, of Yahweh, is in there, and the Most High is saying, "Come out of her, my people, that you be not partakers of her sins and receive not of her plagues." Her sins have reached unto heaven, and Elohim have remembered her iniquities. We can't be connected to that stuff, or else we gonna get everything that Babylon get. Just like Israel couldn't be connected to Mitzrayim, or else Mitzrayim was gonna get everything. Israel was gonna get everything that Mitzrayim got. And the distinction was that blood on the doorpost. That distinction was that Lamb of Elohim. The distinction is Yeshua. If we not truly connected to Yeshua, casting away our love for this world and dedicating our lives to the love of Messiah, and making a clear distinction between us and them, we gonna catch these plagues and these judgments that's not made for us. The plagues and these judgments ain't made for his people. But if you don't make a distinction between yourself and Babylon, guess what? You getting this stuff that wasn't even made for you. You still gonna get it. That belt got somebody else's name on it, but you gonna get whooped with it, lest you make a distinction between yourself and this wicked world.
You said get out the way of the belt.
Get out the way of the belt,
Trying to stand in front.
because that belt is coming. It is swinging hard,
Yeah.
and unless you duck when he say duck, you getting it. Because he's swinging without repentance, right? He's swinging without. He's not a respecter of persons with his belt swing, and he let you know when it's coming and what you gotta do to not get smacked with it. And you know what that is truly being attached to Messiah, truly making a distinction between you and this Babylon thing, and truly manifesting your love for Messiah and your genuine hatred for the world, and a manifestation of that. And so, you know, that's what we wanted to really bring out today in regards to the Torah portion, the fact that the Most High wants for us to rise up and go. The Most High wants for us to stand up on his principles and move forward and walk in the direction that he's leading us right now. Right? And you figure out how you get there on the way. But the first thing you got to do is just rise up and go. Okay? All right. So that being said, we're going to go ahead and end on that note. And y'all willing, we will be back on next week. I want to say for now, Shabbat Shalom to everyone, and enjoy your week. And y'all willing, we'll see you next time. Okay.
Shabbat shalom.
All right. Shabbat shalom.